So our guided activity will implement character processing, and we'll start with introducing a character counter library. This library will contain various utilities that will help us to count various characters that may appear in a text. Now, the first step is to think how you want to design this library. What will be the general organization of the library, like the steps in a complex program. So let's start first by thinking what kind of methods we'll need in our library. And sure, we like first to define the counter. Then we like to be able to print the counter. And sure, we like to update the counter for some text. Update the counter for new text. And if we do these three main operations, we may say, okay, I can define my counter, then I can print what the current values for the counter are, and sure, I can update with new text the counter and count more characters with my counter. So these three operations seems to offer enough power for my library to do its counting role. But this is not all. Also, we need to define, okay, what is a counter and what we count. So we need a kind of formalization of the elements that appear in the library. And we may say, okay, we want to count some characters, and we need to provide these characters because there are many types of characters. You have special symbols, you have special letters like Chinese letters, Arabic letters. So Java knows to work with a lot of characters, a lot of types of characters. So we'll need also to be more specific what characters we want to count. We cannot say count everything. Sure, that will be something that we can do to identify what characters appear and to count only the characters that appear in text. But for the type of programs that we want to implement in this guided activity, this will not be the best strategy. So let's say we want to count some characters that will be provided in input. And the easiest way is just to have a string with the characters that we want to count. So if I want to count some characters, I put them in a string and I count them based on that string. So let's be more specific here. We want to define the counter, define a counter for characters provided in an input set. And I put set here because I don't want to have duplications. And let's see how these methods, for instance, will look like. So I may have I will need to make it public, static, and I will return a counter. What is a counter? So a counter, it's basically we need to count how many times something appear, and we'll use index-based link between the input set and the counter array, and then this must be an array of integers because it will count how many times something appears. And I may say here define counter, and as input I need to provide the character set, right? I want to count some character set. So I need to provide this set or counting set, counted set. Let's put it counted character set. So counted set because it's a little bit more suggestive. So now let's finalize this definition. So we'll need to put here as input so we'll have the parameter counted set that will string with the characters that will be counted. I'll put here set because I don't have to have duplicated values, and I will return counter for the characters, array of integers, indexed, index linked with counted set. So in other words, I want this one to be linked to my counting set, but based on the index. So the same index in the counted set has a corresponding counter. So what we need to do first is to define this counter, and my counter sure will have the same size as a counted set. So I know how many characters I will have in the counted set, and so many elements I'll put in my array. And also we know that by default is initialized with 0, but I always like to do explicit initialization, just because some languages don't have this default initialization, and I want to be sure you know what's happening, what by default it's created. So initially I don't have anything, so my counter, all the values in my counter will be 0. So at the end I can return the counter. So what I return an array that, for instance, if my counted set, and I'll give here an example, always is good to have example, for counted, or I'll put here define counter of ABC, return an int of 3. I'll put here 0, 0, comma 0, so 3 zeros with counter int of 3 with counter of 0, counting with, let's put this on the next line, counting how many times A appears, count of 1 for B's, and count of 2 for C's. So you see, it's index-based correspondence, and if I provide as input ABC, define counter will return an array of 3 characters or 3 integers, each integer corresponding to one of the characters. So the first count of 0 will be for A, count of 1 for B, count of 3 for C. And sure, before providing any text, all these are zeros. So let's see how this works. So we'll try now to test the define counter, and it's easy to test. I can just have here I just want to counter 1 or counter, let's put ABC, and I want to define, so let's call character counter or define counter for my list ABC, and basically it's the example from that I use. Now we'll also like to print this counter. For now I'll just put a generic print that will not do much, but why I want to put this print is just to mark it and be able to debug the program, because debugging the program will allow me to see the return result, and as you can see it has 3 elements and all are 0, like in the example provided as for the definition of the function. So we define the counter. what we like to do next will be to print the counter in the next video.